visual art team. I'm going to share some slides that I've shared previously and go through some of the personalized competency-based learning, that the understanding what we're working towards. And then we'll have another training in one of our PLC meetings on the second Wednesdays about this a little bit more in depth, and what the junior highs have done to make sure that they are doing personalized competency-based learning with their students. So the USBE's definition of personalized learning is that educators engaging all students with high expectations for shared learning goals and empowering each learner to take ownership of their strengths, needs, and interests while tailoring flexible supports to maximize student growth and competence. So that's a lot of language in one sentence. So I think let's break that up a little bit. So educators, so you are engaging students with high expectations for their learning goals, for shared learning goals with you and the student, with all the students as a whole classroom. So you're engaging students with high expectations, and then because you're engaging them with high expectations, you're empowering them to take ownership of their strengths, to take ownership of their needs, and to take ownership of their interests. So taking ownership of your strengths might be that I'm really good at this aspect and I'm going to lean into that strength. Taking ownership of your needs is I'm not sure how to do this skill, or what I'm missing, or what I need to learn or understand more. And then so that would be ownership of your needs, and then ownership of your interests. So what are you interested in and why are you interested in that? So that would be the taking ownership part. And then you tailor flexible supports to maximize the student growth and competence. So tailoring the flexible supports. When you're teaching a skill or a concept in visual art, what do you need to do to help them get to that? If they're not visual art learners, which you will have in your classrooms, how are you going to help them achieve visual art concepts if they don't learn through visual art, if they learn through reading instructions, if they learn in different types, if they learn through music or things like that? However they learn, you want to create some flexible supports to maximize that student growth. And then at the end of the day, we want students to be able to demonstrate competencies in the skills and techniques, and also the understanding of art concepts. So one of the characteristics of personalized competency-based learning is that students will move on to the next level within a subject area only after they have demonstrated proficiency at the current level. So I'm going to talk about a ceramics class, because I've talked to Dallas recently about this. Is if a student can't center their clay, they can't move forward and start making a lot of different items on their wheel. They have to continue to learn how to center their clay. And then they need to learn how to create a cylinder. If they can't create a cylinder, they can't move forward. So this might be something you're already doing in your classroom. You might already not allow them to move on to the next subject area until after they've demonstrated some level of proficiency at the current level you're working on. If they are not at that current level, how can we continue to offer supports that are flexible for them as they move forward, that maybe isn't just you going and walking up to them and helping them understand that, because there's only one of you and there's lots of students at lots of different areas. Another characteristic of PCBL is that students learn content at their own pace. So time is not a factor in judging their competencies. So if a student takes all year long to center the clay or to get the right technique for shading, if they get it by the end of the year or at some point, then that's not going to affect the time. How long it takes them doesn't affect them, because they've been able to demonstrate that competency. So that's another characteristic of personalized competency-based learning, which is the PCBL. A third characteristic of personalized competency-based learning is that students have multiple opportunities and ways to learn specific content. So this would be, where you might have to check in and approach teaching content or concepts in a different way than you have in the past. If you're always showing using verbal instructions and showing by your hands, if a student needs to read, then that might be an important thing to look at. Also, you have students develop agency as central focus in addition to proficiency with academic content. What this may look like for students is that they get to develop some agency, or they get to make some choices in what proficiency they're going to be working with, what their central focus is going to be. And this can be has a variety of ways to address it or look at it for students. The next characteristic of PCBL is that students have a voice in the teaching and learning process. So this might be allowing students to choose different ways to approach pointillism, or to choose how to express themselves in a different medium or a different approach within the same skill set that you're trying to teach. As I've gone around to the art teachers' classrooms, I see there's a lot of student voice that is developed and shown in your classrooms already. The fifth one characteristic is when you have students that have a choice in the teaching and learning process. So you can do A or B, and they still will get you to proficiency. And so that can be another part of the learning process, and helping them to reach competency is different approaches or choices that they get to make. When you look at traditional education, traditional is really focused on the work or the labor that's put in. It's usually a collection of work that's gathered at the end, and grades don't necessarily report progression. They report if the students accomplished an assignment. Everyone will stay together naturally in a traditional setting, and it's very summative in nature. So at the end of the term, this is your grade. That's a summative evaluation. And grades don't necessarily represent mastery. They represent hard work. So an example could be in a classroom that I took, and I'm using an outside of an art classroom, but you can apply this to an art classroom. But I took a class on government when I was in high school, and that was packets of work that I filled out information on. And usually I could just Google that. It did not represent that I understood the material or anything. It just represented that I could fill in a blank space on a packet. So that could be a traditional, compared to personalized competency-based learning, which is focused on the learning process. It's a collection of student performances or student artwork or students what their final products are. The grades represent a proficiency in the competencies on the standards. What that means is that grades represent what students can actually accomplish and do with the art skills or standards that you're working with. Personalized competency-based learning is also really formative in nature with a personal progression. So you're checking in regularly with students. What do they understand? What do they not understand? Where do they need additional support? Grades are based on evidence from the performances about standard competency rather than showing that they accomplished X, Y, and Z. And then the progression is outlined across grade bands. So what we're working on long term over the next couple years is a K-12 vertical alignment. We recently adjusted the K-6 art standards, and that's going to be a process that we kind of refine. And as we move forward with any of these standards and with personalized competency-based learning, there's going to be a refining process, and things are going to be adjusted and they're going to change. The other part of PCBL is that there's lots of things that fall under the umbrella of personalized competency-based learning. You have mastery learning, so you don't move forward until you've mastered something. You have standards-based grading, so you're grading based on accomplishing a standard. You have rigor and relevance, so you're getting students to do rigor, and it is relevant to their own lives and what they're accomplishing. There's also blended learning, so there's going to be some technology aspects of that. And then there's a competency-based assessment. So that's a little overview of personalized competency-based learning. We went over some of the information on Canvas, what that looks like, what we have built out for you. And we went through that already in the meeting previous, but I wanted to go a little bit more in depth with personalized competency-based learning for you, and then to have you think about how that would look in your art classroom. What are you already doing to give students a choice in their learning process? What are you already doing that gives students a voice in their learning process and in the teaching process? How are you helping students develop their agency or the ability to make choices? In what ways do your students already have multiple opportunities and ways to learn your content? Are students learning at their own pace? Are they able to take the time that they need to truly understand skills before more skills are added? And then are students moved on to the next level of the subject area only after they've demonstrated proficiency? So those are some things you can think about within your content and within your classroom. Because as we think about those things, we have a lot of value in helping students to be engaged. Because what we can do as art teachers is that you can teach them skill sets that are going to teach the creative process for the rest of their lives, the ability to look at things differently for the rest of their lives. So what you're doing is not just teaching students how to do art, but you're teaching them how to be and look through the world with an artist's eye and with a creative eye. So thank you so much. We're going to share a form at the end that you can ask fill out any questions or ways that we can continue to help train you and support you in personalized competency-based learning.